A very good evening to you, South Africa, those watching around the world. My name is Blaine Herman. Our sign language interpreter tonight is Triforce Ntulengwe. This is It's Topical. Our digital audience, please, kindly. Thank you very much indeed. It's good to have them on the program. As always, we're going to get their burning questions and comments for you in a short while. Just a reminder, digital audience, if you have any comments or burning questions, please put up your virtual hand. I'll do my very best to get you on air. The purpose and power of protests. Section 17 of the South Africa's Constitution. Everyone has a right, peacefully and unarmed, to assemble, to demonstrate, to picket, and to present petitions. So that's entrenched in our Constitution. Okay, but is it the best possible tool to bring about a positive change in your situation in this day and age? We have seen and experienced powerful protests of the past, eventually bringing about great change. The obvious example is protests against apartheid. But if you assess the protests of late, has it brought about the desired results, or are there better tools to use for political expression and for voicing of grievances? To paraphrase what Professor Suzanne Boyson wrote regarding the ballot and the brick, tonight, let's explore the politics of attaining service delivery. Look, our aim is not to diminish the power of protest. No, not at all. We know that many people have laid down their lives on the front lines protesting for just causes. Our aim is to give it context and understand its power, which leads us to our question of the week. And we're asking you, basically, do you still find protest marches effective in South Africa? Come, follow me. Let us know at It's Topical SABC. What is the best possible way to convince those in authority of the righteousness of your cause? Is there still value in venting your frustration on the streets in this day and age? Let us know at It's Topical SABC. Now, time for your roundup. All right, so it's a busy news week. Let's get to other topical stories of the past week. On Thursday, you'll remember Dr. Bob Palazzo was voted out as executive mayor of the city of Johannesburg in another motion of no confidence. The motion was passed by 140 to 129 votes at the Johannesburg Council sitting in Braamfontein. The following day, Al Jamaah's Tapelo Ahmad was elected executive mayor of the city. Ahmad received 138 votes. He was up against Action SA's Funzi Ngobeni, who garnered 46 votes, and his predecessor with 81 votes. Take a look.
First of all, I'm very appreciative of every kind word that was said to me in this council, regardless of who it came from. A lot of work has happened in the last 13 months, and it feels good when somebody appreciates it, and they need to be recognized for appreciating it. As for what they said about the events leading up to today, unfortunately, yes, we were trying as the Democratic Alliance with our partners to bring in the Patriotic Alliance to stabilize our government. As you know, we've been a minority government since our government first started collapsing in September. Whether or not I'm being punished, well, I think the Patriotic Alliance should say where that's coming from. I think they should provide more information, but politics is politics, and politics will play itself out in all different ways. All I can say is, should I feel a need to stand for any position, I will stand for it. I've got a passion to serve my country. I've got a passion to serve my people, and I don't believe that anybody should stand in the way of that.
We are here. We were entrusted by these same parties that have voted us in as the mayor, representing the communities, because each and every councillor here is representing. It's a proportional representation of the communities. And maybe if we are proxies of the communities, because not every community member will be here and participate in legislating the laws. But we are mandated by them, and we are here to deliver those services.
All right, it's the big trending story of the day as the EFF leader gave the closing remarks at the party's meeting earlier this afternoon. Julius Malema says they will shut down the country on the 20th of March to demand an end to power cuts and call for the resignation of President Cyril Ramaphosa. He says their march is informed by rising cost of living and poverty, high levels of corruption, and a lack of service delivery, among others. This is what he had to say. Take a look.
South Africans today make an income simply to go to work and survive on loans and debt whose repayments costs continue to rise because of poor macroeconomic policy at the Reserve Bank. Accordingly, in line with the need to resolve the immediate challenges confronting our society, the EFF has resolved to hold a national shutdown to demand the return of electricity and for the resignation of Cyril Ramaphosa on the 20th of March 2023.
All right, so the EFF planning a national shutdown and the Democratic Alliance having marched close to Luthuli House in the past week. Our word on the street feature today is from a protest site. We went to Carletonville, where residents were marching to local municipal offices to voice their concerns regarding the power cuts and other service delivery failures. And we asked them if they truly believe their action would yield any positive results. And this is what they had to say.
Right now, Sibuyapi, a civic center. Ukutigena Siseni, a memorandum. Because of this thing was not going to end. That is why we decided to put together a protest. So our councillors have failed us. Even today, they are not even here. While they know we are protesting about into Eslupa Sonke La Forgeville, and that they are still staying here in Forgeville. Into Eyanzagalena Musha.
The repeater grade 11 because of umbali. Masifuna ukugugula i-Wi-Fi ayisebenzi because of umbali. Asikwazi ukuya e-library for i-Googulation because of umbali. Sibuya ebusuku asikwazi ukufunda. Masithi sifunda ngekhandlela, ikhandlela lisheshe licime.
Kopa hore mogwanto o re thuso o re sebeletse ya ka bana ba rona ba tere mogwanto. Le rona re le batho ba bagolo re tsamaile le bone. Bona gore ke na le 70 years ka se sebaka se ke tsamaile le bone ka go bane ke a bona mogwanto o ka re tswela mosolo. Ke kopa thuso.
Mogwanto o tsamaile hantle ha ka ba di dintwa hare. O re tshwere sentle. Ne ke kopa le mohla o etsalang hape. Ebe motsamo o tsena fela.
Bale re go makhansela le re mmeyara office ka moka ileng godimo re ga ba theoge ba tle ba dire mmereko wa bona. Go na le maloko a bana mo bao ba ikopantshitsego le bile ba itirela service delivery ba fiela ditrata tsa kokosi so re masepala o kae kokosi ka tsogo ya loka gantse mamenemene ale a ntse a dutse ka mogare ka mo ba dutseng ka gona re gopela re ba re berekele jwale ka ge re ba kgethile ya leboga.
Your voices always matter on this program. I want to get you more context with regards to what we're talking about today. Let's give you a sense of what we know and why it matters. With regards to protests, let's go to the magic wall. With regards to this year, in fact, January, protests, recent protests in South Africa, beginning of Jan, disruptive protests were reported in these areas. Phoenix, Kroonstad, I beg your pardon. Let me go back here. There we go, Gremlins. There we go. Phoenix, Kroonstad, Boksburg, Bushbuckridge. On the 25th, you'll remember that DA members, they marched to near Luthuli House. 26th, the next day, EFF members marched to Johannesburg, to the Union Buildings. 26th, 27th, Queenstown was shut down by protests. At the 27th, protest actions in Carletonville and Deep Sleuth. I guess the big question is, why? What are the reasons for such protests? The energy crisis, the lack of service delivery, corruption, student issues in the higher education sector. So which leads us to the hotspots. Where are the hotspots with regards to protests? We've got the city centers, right? Residential areas, along major highways, near governmental buildings. And in terms of advice, if you do want to engage in certain protests, heed the directives of the local authorities, monitor local media for updates, plan for road travel delays, reconfirm the status of routes in the hours preceding travel, consider alternative routes around the impact areas. So that in a nutshell, right, is the number of protests this year so far, the reasons for the protest, and the best, or some would say the safest way to engage in protest action. Protests and voting, seen as important mechanisms if you're looking to get improved levels of service delivery. How do they stack up? Also, how do we get to a point where violence is no longer an effective tool to provoke action from leaders? Let's discuss. We have the better minds on the program tonight. Our digital audience, as always, thank you very much indeed. We also have Zwelinzima Vavi, General Secretary of the South African Federation of Trade Unions. Liam Jacobs, who joins us via Zoom, is the federal leader of the DA Students Organization, as well as political analyst Dr. Levindo. Thank you very much indeed, gentlemen. Digital audience, as always, great to have you on your program. Just a reminder, if you are or you want to ask a question to our guests, raise your virtual hand, and I'll do my very best to get you on air. Mr. Vavi, to you first. With regards to, let's look at context in terms of how effective protests are. SAFTU and COSATU marched in August, shut down. Joint collaboration against injustices, with regards to the economic situation in South Africa, power cuts, etc., etc. But what has changed since? What's the tangible outcomes?
Well, if you were to look at it as a measurement of a once-off protest action that took place on the 24th, you can easily come to the conclusion that there is no need, there is no value to embark on protest actions because they deliver nothing or too little. But in reality, if you look at the activities, the protest actions, the mass demonstrations in South Africa in the spell of about 28 years of democracy, you'll only come to one conclusion, that mass action does work. But I want to remind you of the most important victory to be scored by ordinary people in South Africa was a victory led by a little unknown organization before this, the Treatment Action Campaign, when we had a president who was saying that he have not seen anybody dying of HIV and AIDS, when government statistics were telling us that more than 900 to 1,000 people were dying every single day from HIV and AIDS-related illnesses. It took that campaign of this Treatment Action Campaign, and with COSATU, then very powerful and united, and a range of other civil society organizations joining that campaign. And that created havoc inside the ANC, leading to the removal of that president who was denying the fact that people were dying out of age, resulting directly to 360,000 people dying over the period of 10 years of his presidency. And the next president knew that unless you prioritize the issue of treatment, you will not go very far in your government. And that's why today we have 7 million people on antiretrovirals. That's the biggest victory of mass action in 28 years.
No doubt, big wins that stemmed from protest action. The question, I guess, Dr. Ndo, is does it need to be sustained waves of protests? Is that the recipe for success in terms of getting those tangible outcomes? Or have attitudes hardened, I'm talking about those in power, to such a point where it renders the issue of protest moot?
Part of our democratic system is to allow protests as a way to influence those that are in power to take decisions that are favorable to the people. You don't always have to see protests in a negative light. You also need to look at the positivities of protests. There are those who would participate in a protest and after a day or two, they will say, what have we achieved? But in its own establishment, protests are created to create an awareness and have the feel of how the people on the ground actually feel and what is it that they think should happen. And hence I say they should not only be seen in the negative light. They are there to assist those who are in authorities to do things differently, to change their minds and respond positively to what ordinary citizens are saying.
Right.
So in all instances where there are protests, there are those who think that nothing would happen. They are very important because those that are given power to govern are supposed to respond to protests and do something better at the end of the day.
But do you think populist quick wins or quick solutions or solutions that are put forward that are not practically viable, does that exacerbate anger amongst communities, which leads to often frustrations boiling over, violence, etc.?
It also depends on how those that are in government are responding to the needs of the people. There are many instances where people would be put into office and they actually do nothing and neglect their responsibilities. And that is where ordinary citizens on the ground would stand up and ensure that something is actually done. Another area that is very important for me is that there are many instances where leaders will not be honest with the citizens. And instead of going out and tell the citizens their challenges, the parameters in which they're actually operating, and some of the constraints, you don't get leaders doing so. So it is time to get very honest leaders who must be able to go out to the people, interact with the people on a regular basis. And that's why you're going to find a situation where there is a linkage between leaders and citizens on the ground.
How do you forge that link between leaders and citizens? And answering that, what do you think exacerbates the anger among citizens from leaders?
Lying and false promises. Dr. Doe is spot on. When a leader obviously go out and promises heavens and earth in a municipality that have no resources to deliver any of the things that is promising or she's promising, then you're going to create moments of anger and frustrations amongst our people. Look at the situation of where I come from. I come from the Enoch Mkijima municipality in Queenstown. Is my town where currently there is a wave of mass mobilization and protest against appalling conditions that our people are finding themselves in. And one of the fundamental reasons why that municipality will never ever deliver to even the most basic aspirations of our people is that it's not they who can solve the problem at the municipal level, but it is the national government that have adopted a neoliberal program that is actually cutting budgets towards the grants that the municipalities must get. So you lump together a host of small towns and rural areas into a Queenstown that have a very small tax base that can never deliver proper roads. Where I come from in Sada or in EU, our rural areas, or in Molteno or anywhere else that is around Queenstown. So you will have these frustrations, and when people are not engaged politically to say that actually our problems, yes, may be caused by corruption, because there's massive corruption allegations against the councillors there up top. But then you have to engage and to say to the people, but at the fundamental center of the crisis here is neoliberalism. And from a SAFTU perspective, we'll go further to say it is the system of capitalism itself that is never designed as a system to address even the most basic needs of the people. Look, here is what is creating havoc in South Africa. There are three problems. The first problem is that we are the home of the inequalities. The second, all over the world, no country compares with us. Secondly, we are the home as a country of most youth that is unemployed. And thirdly, we hold the title that we are the worst when it comes to unemployment amongst industrialized and industrializing economies.
Which talks to the
Now, the combination of those three means that you have seething problems of people who have never worked, who have no prospect of ever working as young people. They grow into the 20s, the 30th, no possibilities of working.
Right.
And they get pushed into all manner of social ills of society. As a result of that, they will at some point take out their frustrations. Some of us long warned that this country is sitting on a ticking time bomb that one day is going to explode. Already, we are holding another fourth title, by the way. We are the home of the protests in the world.
Yeah.
We're holding 5 major protests in this country every day. Our problem may be that those things, those protest actions are not coordinated at the national level. But they do happen from city to rural area. Most of them do not get any publicity.
It is no doubt ubiquitous, but I guess the question is, how effective is it? Let's bring in Liam Jacobs from the DA Students Organization. Liam, is Liam with us? I don't see him. Okay, we'll come back to Liam in a short while. Oh, there we go, Liam. Good to have you on the program. When we look at, from a youth point of view, touching on what Mr. Vavi has said as well, the DA had a recent protest near Lutuli House. From a youth point of view, do they see it as a step in the right direction, effective, or just a waste of time?
Everybody in the studio, and good evening to the millions and the millions of South Africans who are watching this at home, and a further good evening to those who are going to watch this later after their load shedding schedule is done. Look, when it comes to protest and its effectiveness, I think from the perspective of young people in South Africa and students in particular, the protest that happened this week was tremendously effective, and protests themselves, peaceful protests, are very, very effective. Because in a country such as this, where protest culture is tremendously rich and where we know what protests are, peaceful protests are imperative, not only in mobilizing towards change, but also sending a message that is loud, a message that is clear, and a message that is easily understood by those in power. And I think more so that this week's protest that we saw, our march to the House, was a tremendously effective protest.
Let's bring in our digital audience as well to talk to this issue. Let me see their names, please. Could you help me control? I think we have Kustas. Kustas, if you can unmute, there we go. Your take on the effectiveness of protests.
Good evening, and thank you for inviting us. Protesters don't lose in South Africa. So when you go out to protest, generally victory is guaranteed. So it is this reason that we use peaceful protest, because we know that it delivers results, particularly if the cause is a just cause. So protesting is very necessary, because when leaders don't listen, what you normally get is that people get frustration, so they go into a protest. And protesting is more like a loudspeaker to speak to the government, whoever has to listen. And in most cases, protesters don't lose.
All right. Let's speak to Nonkululeko. Your take. Do you think the issue of protests is still effective, or should we follow the other traditional routes of writing to your councillors, getting meetings with your public representatives? Is it laughable at this stage of the game?
Good evening. It's Nonkululeko from Rise Mzansi. Are they effective? Absolutely, yes. It's funny because you mentioned writing letters. And I think an important point to make is that protests are never communities' first options. There isn't a community that experiences a problem and mobilizes at first instance, and the first option is protest. It's because they have written the letters, they have made the phone calls. And it's always, again, because media gets the bigger marches, your fees must fall, your Marikana massacres. On a day-to-day basis, communities are winning through protests. And this morning I was speaking to Mr. Piri, who is part of Rise Mzansi movement. And one of the wins that he was actually telling me about is that in Soweto, there was a community who had actually approached him to assist them with trying to get access to technicians at Eskom. One of the issues that they had is that it was an electrical fault, to a point where even when they opened taps in their homes, 35 houses were affected by this issue. They called, they wrote letters, they waited for months on end, and there was no response. When the community approached Umxolisi, he decided to mobilize the community and go to the ESCOM offices, knowing that they might not get assisted. But they eventually did. They spoke to the manager, and at the following day, the technicians came out and sorted the issue.
Right.
So are protests effective? Do they work? Absolutely. And we have proof of that on the ground on an every single day basis.
And sometimes,
especially with
it doesn't get enough media attention, depending how big it is, isn't it? You often hear about protests only in the traffic report, for instance, you know, when you need to know which routes to take. Chilidzi, to you, sir, with regards to the effectiveness of protests, if you can unmute. Chilidzi is, okay, let's go to Tabis. Oh, there we go. Chilidzi, go ahead.
Hey, greetings to you.
Oh, we're having an issue with your line. We are really battling with your line. Let's try to redial you, Mhle. If Mhle can maybe redial you, we'll come back to you. Tabisa, let's get your take.
Greetings to the viewers at home. Well, maybe what we need to do first is to unpack what is exactly protest. We need to understand that protests are part of political participation. And as a democratic country, we need to understand that we do need to enjoy the right to protest. But then again, the genuine protests do work. But then those ones like your DAs, like your NCs going to the DA and the DA going to the NCs, those are just political shenanigans, parties playing amongst themselves. So I believe that those protests do not work. But then genuine protests do work.
Right. All right. Lesego, you nodding in agreement? Genuine protests. How do you weed out genuine from a lack or a protest that lacks credibility?
I think genuine protests are those where it's, just small members from the community protesting peacefully. I think that those tend to not be so effective. So I actually disagree with Liam and the gentleman that spoke after him that peaceful protests are effective. I think we are a country that has a rich history with regards to protests and them being effective and bringing about positive change. Yeah. But a lot of those were very disruptive, and if you're not damaging infrastructure and blocking highways, then the mayor or whoever that you're protesting against is not going to come down from their office and come and address you with your needs. If there's not a media coverage, then the issues turn not to be attended to with the urgent that it requires. So I think really it's sad that in order for them to be effective most of the time, they have to be disruptive, and that's very regressive.
We need to get to a place where this isn't the case. We need to talk about these issues, because you can't only have, because we burnt down certain things or certain infrastructure, schools, etc., then we get officials coming in to sort out the problem. Only when you have a camera on the protest, then we get results. It can't stay at that level. We need to talk a bit about the factors that a successful protest is based on. Also, what hurts a protest? We're going to take a quick break. The better minds on the program, we're going to get you some answers next. Welcome back, and a warm welcome to our SABC 2 viewers. My name is Blaine Herman. Our sign language interpreter this evening is Triforce Nsulenga. This is It's Topical, our digital audience with us tonight. We also have Mr. Zwelinzima Vavi, General Secretary of the South African Federation of Trade Unions. Liam Jacobs is Federal Leader of the DA Students Organization, as well as political analyst Dr. Levi Indo. Now, the purpose and power of protests. Everyone has a right peacefully and unarmed to assemble, to demonstrate, to picket, and to present petitions. Our Constitution says so. But is it the best possible tool to bring about positive change in your situation, in this day and age? Which leads us to our question of the week. And we're asking you, how effective are protest marches to bring about change? Let us know at It's Topical SABC. Digital audience here, our guests here, let's get you some answers. Mr. Vavi, with regards to the issue of violence and protests, not all protests start off violent. There is this threshold where you go past, where frustrations just boil over. I wonder what, the research tells us about how many violent protests we had in South Africa. But what exacerbates it? What do you think?
Well, unfortunately, in South Africa, most of the protest actions do tend violence. In fact, there was a study done by a Wits University about 10 years ago, and they asked a question to protesters. Why do you always find an urge to be violent, to burn a tire and to block the roads and all of that? The answer was very interesting. The answer came back to say, we do believe that unless the government officials see a smoke, there's a tire burning, there's a road blocked, there will be no attention. We will not be responded to. There's a culture in which I think that government have to work on that. There's a culture that calls are not responded to or acted upon. Memorandums, no matter how big the protest and how many times you've had it, if you don't expect even an acknowledgement, then you're more likely to be sent a very junior official to come and receive your memorandum with thousands and thousands of people participating, which itself creates moments of anger amongst the people. So we've got to have a more responsive government that will not wait for the tire to burn before they do something about the fact that there have been no sewage removal, or there have been no debt collection, the collection of debt in the corner of the street somewhere. They would be more responsive to say, we know, we're interacting, and our people are frustrated, and they have a right to be frustrated. And the issue is arrogance of the rulers, unfortunately. It's been extremely unhelpful.
So how do we change the mindset, Dr. Ndo? When I was a reporter on the field, that's what you hear. People say, in order for us to get their attention, I need to burn something, I need to break something, otherwise they won't come. How do we change that mindset from our leaders' point of view, from a civic point of view?
Well, I think firstly, this is supposed to be a two-way process. The leaders that are leading municipalities, those that are at provincial level and national level, are the same people that are elected by the communities themselves. You need leaders that would not be removed from the communities immediately after they're being elected. Equally, you need leaders that would have an ear to listen to the concerns of the people, get in touch with the people on a regular basis, and provide answers to their concerns. But where the finger has to go, it has to go to our political parties. Our political parties don't appear to be giving us the best of what they have, especially at local level. If you just get one municipality, for an example, and look at the caliber of people that are there in a municipality, you would be very much worried. And that says to me that it has to start from political parties themselves to give citizens the best of what they have. And in that way, citizens might also then be able to get the best of the services. And that is why currently you have got many people in a ward who would not even know their leaders, because leaders are actually aloof from the people. And even when they've got genuine concerns to raise, they don't know where to go. And most people would agree with me that they don't know their councillors because they're just not available.
I remember
there's a crisis there, Dr. Doe. Also, I think we must emphasize this point. The politics of South Africa as a whole are in a crisis of credibility, of legitimacy. The crisis we face is that a lot of councillors, in fact all of them, if you compare what I'm going to say with the results of the last local government elections, most of our people are no longer interested to go and vote for councillors, including most of the political parties at the national level. The percentages of people who are bordering to go and register and to vote is continuously on a decline. So when we have a crisis of legitimacy, of credibility, then there is a gap in that people are protesting against people they don't even know or recognize them as their leaders to start with. So It's not like you are holding somebody accountable that you elected in the last elections. You never participated in those elections because you have given up on these guys long time ago that they will ever solve the problem of your community. That's at the center of the crisis of protest in South Africa.
You speak about not knowing people. It reminds me of a story that we covered. And after a disaster, people were blaming their councillor. And they knew him by name. They didn't know him by face. And then he came there a day or two later and says, but how can you blame me? I wasn't even here. And they said, that is the problem. You're not here. We don't know what you look like. Which leads to, let's bring in the days, Liam Jacobs.
There's an important part just before.
Go on.
We don't know you because you're unlikely to be even residing in the area where there's a protest action yourself. You moved long time ago to town, but you want to be a councillor serving us here in this street, in this area. That's a crisis of credibility.
Well, let's talk to Liam with regards to our political parties giving off the best. The end result is protest. Let's work backwards. In order to end protests, we need to sort out the issue before it gets to that stage. Are we giving our people the best in terms of local government?
Where the DA governs, the best is being given, and that is an undisputable fact. And that is precisely why not only in local governments, but also nationally, you see this outrage towards the government is because in areas where we do not govern, municipalities where we do not govern, districts where we do not govern, provinces where we do not govern, services are not being rendered to the quality and to the standard that they ought to be rendered towards. So that is why you see the outrage on the behalf of citizens, and particularly with regards again to political parties themselves protesting. Political parties represent individuals from all over South Africa, particularly the Democratic Alliance. The Democratic Alliance represents individuals from all walks of life, all backgrounds in South Africa. So when we march and when we protest, we do so representing the plights and we represent the struggles of all South Africans. So when South Africans come together and they hold hands and they march towards something, they march in the name of a common goal, they send messages to those in power. They send messages that are loud, and they send these messages with the aim of being heard and with the aim of venting a form of frustration.
Let's try our digital audience again. Chilitsi, let's unmute. Let's hear from you. Hopefully your line is much better. Go on.
Yes, greetings. How are you?
Very well.
Yes, my name is Semezane Chilis, and on this topic that you are speaking about today, it is something that I have extensively written about in my book, which is titled The Collapse of Political Leadership in South Africa. So in this book, I wrote about the issue of protest that, if you remember what Mr. Tele reported, he said that there are 2,455 protests in this country within 3 months, from July to September, 27 protests a day. And then if you look at this protest, they do not match what is on the ground. I mean that if the protests were effective now, I mean that on the ground we should be seeing more service delivery, we will be seeing more improvement on issues. And on the issue that Mr. Levindo talked about, why are people South Africans protesting, and he talked about the issue of honest, that the leaders should come on the ground and be honest with the citizens. The leaders cannot come down on the ground and be honest. They've always been lying, so they lose credibility, just like what Zwelinzima Vavi was saying about the crisis of leadership, which is something that I've also written in my book. And Mr. Zwelinzima Vavi, I inbox you on Twitter, selling you this book. I'm glad that today you are here. Maybe you'll be able to respond to me on Twitter. Even Dr. Ndova, I would really love him to read my book and comment.
There you go. Well, look, you used the platform effectively, right? You got the guest here. Thank you, Chilitsi. Siyabulela, your take, sir.
Can I be unmuted? I'm not sure which points to actually address, but I just need to say that in South Africa, historically, we have seen that a democratic dispensation is brought by mass action. Zwelinzima Vavi did allude to that earlier, and it's facts that we cannot dispute. However, We need to be ashamed of ourselves as South Africans that close to 30 years into democracy, we are still having people protesting in such a manner of going out to the street. So protesting is huge. It's a broad thing. You know, some protest on Twitter, some protest through mass mobilization on the ground. Others, they withhold their economic power and so on and so forth. However, seeing multitude of South Africans running on the ground when it's hot, sometimes it's raining, sometimes it's cold, we should be ashamed of ourselves. And just to say that when we march, we and this is a gospel according to observation, it is not only to call those who are in power to account. We are also raising awareness on issues of national importance. We are also mobilizing our people towards a common goal to say that some of the things that need to happen, we need to do them together. But of course, you know, when you have a proxy government like we do here in South Africa, we know that we don't have a president, for an example. And then for you to get the attention of that office, you need to bend something. And perhaps that is why South African recent protests are not as effective. It's because they are too peaceful. And then our protests are peaceful, but we are, trying to address serious violence like load shedding. This government is instituting violence against the people of this country. So those are the points I just want to make. But also to say that we need to, also start thinking of protesting as begging. When we protest, we are begging these people to listen to us. And it cannot be. It cannot be. One of my favorite writers say that in closing, that to sin by silence when we should protest makes cowards out of men. But I'm really starting to believe that even when we protest, we come across as though we are cowards because of this very same government. But I do condone protesting. Let's continue protesting. Let's meet next week in Sandton, Sunning Hill. We're going to ESCOM again and again and again and again until these people start listening to us. Thank you.
If anything, protests, sustained protests, waves of protests, turns casual protesters, participants, into lifelong activists, and thereby sustaining the core. We need to take a quick, let's go to our WhatsApp calls. Now, we asked you to send us your comments with regards to our question, how effective are protests in this day and age? This is what you had to say.
Protest marches remain effective in pushing for change. And the reason why I'm saying so is because they bring attention to the public eye on social and political problems. But to a certain extent, these days it doesn't seem to be working because there's some sort of lift club when it comes to protesting. People are rallying up each other so that they can reach a common understanding, and it doesn't seem to be working. So the government needs to do better.
Protests are not the effective way of doing things in South Africa. Just like my lecturer is 60 years, is 20 years older than me, told me that they protested in 1976, they burned tires, they did everything, but nothing happened. So it's not the way. People they must just negotiate and make a plan to come up with one decision, but not to protest.
To me, I find it not being effective because people protest to try to alert the leaders about certain challenges or anything that involves service delivery. But what do leaders do? They just sign the memorandum and file it far away from their file cabinet and just leave it like that.
They are fighting for their rights. South Africa is now going down, economic is going down. No electricity, industry are shutting down.
Protesting for electricity is good, but we have to face the problem in other way than destroying the things or the government road.
All right, thank you very much indeed for your WhatsApp messages. Our digital audience still with us. Tandeka, I see you, as well as Nzuzo. We'll come back to you in a short while. We need to take a quick break. More next. All right. right, so welcome back. This is It's Topical. We're talking about the effectiveness of protests here in South Africa. It is indeed ubiquitous, but how effective is it? We've got a number of guests here today, Zwelinzima Vavi, Dr. Levindo, as well as Liam Jacobs from the DA. We did invite other political parties, by the way, but they haven't responded. So let's carry on with our conversation. Let's bring in our digital audience, get their take. Before we run out of time, let me speak to Tandeka Ngobo from UKZN. Talk to us.
Good evening, South Africa, and good evening to everyone. I'd like to say protests do work, literally everywhere, because that's literally the only way the people can deliver their message to government. And if you look at it, over 50% of young people are now frustrated of voting because they vote for this party, and that's literally the only time they see the councillor campaigning, and then during the election, and then after that, they are nowhere to be found. And it's one of the issues that normally leads to violent protests, because you only see the councillor during the time, and then that leads to a lack of communication and trust, which results to poor service delivery.
Right.
So majority of the time, if we live in a country where there is communication and trust and integration between our local parties, our councillors, I'm pretty sure South Africa will be a livable country.
Yeah.
There will be no issues of load shedding, poor service delivery, and stuff like that.
Yeah. Look,
thank you.
Trust is the operative word. Ntokozo, you agree? If you can unmute. Ntokozo. There you go. Let's try that. All right, in the meantime, let's take Nzuzo Tabete from UKZN. Nzuzo, go ahead, and we'll come back to you, Ntokozo.
Good evening, South Africa. I just want to say that protests are effective so long as they achieve a certain response from the government. Protests are effective so long as you get a response. So I believe personally that there is a relationship between, or rather a characteristic of democracy is the continuing responsiveness of the government, because our leaders are democratically elected. They represent our needs. So you are democratically elected, yet you are not present in society. You do not represent the needs of the people, and you do not take heed to their cries and their calls. So as long as the government actually responds to the cries of the people, of which they do sometimes, then that makes protests effective.
Right. Let's go to Tina Khashle. Let's get your take with regards to the use of protests or voting. What do you think will strike the biggest blow?
Yes, protests are an up-down experience in a vertical manner in which citizens raise their concerns with government officials. Now, as Emiliana Pankhurst puts this, we protest not because we are lawbreakers, but as an attempt to influence lawmakers. The irony in South Africa is that we are now protesting with lawmakers. People such as Mr. Steenhuisen and others of the EFF who have seats in parliament, if they join civil society in street protests, raising concerns, if they themselves, as members of the legislating arm of government, they cannot influence policies in parliament, they cannot hold the executive accountable. When they join civil society on street protests, who are they protesting against? That's the fundamental issue we're experiencing.
All right, thank you very much indeed for your take. Let's take, did we lose Ntokozo? Briefly, sir.
Yes, good evening.
Go on.
Good evening, you and your viewers at home. My name is Dogozo, and yes, I do think protests are still effective. Protests can work to the degree that they can scare authorities into changing their behavior. Protests are signals saying that we are tired, we are unhappy, and we won't put up with things the way they are.
No longer.
But for that to work, they won't put things the way they are, has to be credible.
Yes.
And nowadays, large protests sometimes lack such credibility.
Yes.
Especially because digital technologies have made them so much easier to organize.
Well, that's that's a good point, actually. And I wonder how social media, the use of social media, you can relatively organize a protest and get thousands of people with relatively less effort, right? But does it take away or add to the credibility of the protest? We're going to come back to you. We need to take a quick break, another quick break. Our guests are here. We're going to get final thoughts as well and explore those issues. More next. We continue our conversation. Let's get some final thoughts, Mr. Zwelinzima Vavi, Dr. Levindo, with regards to the frustrations, venting us frustrations on the streets. What would you say is the best way to go about doing it?
Non-sectarian approach to protest action. Look, with my little experience, I know as a matter of fact that the crisis facing South Africa today, which we have tolerated for so long, in fact, we must be given medals for tolerating load shedding for 15 years. Right. And we have not coordinated a major protest action on non-sectarian basis. Yeah. We deserve a label for that. Not that there have been no protests, there have been many. And, but they are happening all over the show. They are not coordinating. As a result, they are not effective. Any sectarian approach to crisis facing a society is bound to fail. Right. It will be good for social media, retweet, I'm trending today, I, and only I. Yeah. But it's not going to deliver the result. What delivers the results is a broad front of coordinated programs based on the genuine grievances our people are having on the ground. So that's the only way, that's the advice.
Solidifying the society at large. 30 seconds to you.
You need leaders that should be able to be on the ground, to be in touch with the people, to know and understand their concerns. But ordinary citizens themselves should always be organized so that when there are issues, they should be able to rise up.
Dr. Ndo, Mr. Vavi, thank you very much indeed. Digital audience, as always, great to have you on the program. Here's my take. Protests are seen as a catalyst for change in this country. History bears testament. As long as the issues of unemployment, poverty and inequality are firmly entrenched and people can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, then protests persist. When residents take to the streets, you know that they are at their wits' end. Don't you see their desperation? If you do, why are you not acting immediately? I know, red tape, bureaucracy, it's them, not us. He's to blame, she's to blame, they are to blame. What happened to promises of better? Where's the better now? Why all the excuses? Don't you even care anymore? Some of the electorate's burning questions. Look, it can't be a zero-sum game. Zero-sum relating to or denoting a situation in which whatever is gained by one side is lost by the other. It's about altruism, the selfless concern for the well-being of others. So for leaders, introspection is needed. Empathy is needed. Be responsive, be caring, because the way I see it, the power of a successful protest is predicated on the political will and compassion of those in power. And that's my take. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Until next week, take care. Bye-bye.